So I've just finished setting up the molds on the strongback. Now the strongback is a secure platform in which you can put the molds on. So it needs to be flat and level and at a height that you can work on the boat easily. Now the molds actually mold the shape of the hull by when you're putting the planks over it, it then contours those planks to the shape. So you may be wondering, why are two of the molds missing? If you stick around to the end, I'll let you know why. Because I'm building Victoria upside down, I'll need to replace the baseline batten with a construction line batten, which will run parallel to the baseline. This time it will run above the shear and at the top of the stem. This line is the same as the top of the construction strongback. This will basically turn my lofting floor into an assembly jig, and it will aid in keeping everything square, aligned, and generally right where it ought to be. Now the old traditional way of making patterns onto your molding stock is to lay out a series of 8-penny nails along the line that you want to scribe. And then taking a piece of a common material like this pine and putting on top of those nails, being careful not to let them move around, and then press it down really well. In fact, sometimes people would actually walk on there to get an imprint, and then flip it over, and then that is where the imprint of those nail heads hit. Now the problem is these nails can move around very, very easily. I've got a more modern method of doing it that I think is more accurate and easier to do. So the lofted plan that is here on my lofting board represents the outside of the hull. So what we need to do is to subtract the thickness of the hull so that the mold station will then receive that planking on there. So the way I'm going to do that is I have a compass here, and I've got it set to 3/8 of an inch, which is the distance or the thickness of the planking. Now I'm going to start with station 5 because if you'll remember, stations 2, 6, 7, and 9 are the bulkheads. And the bulkheads I'm going to make the molds permanent so that the bulkhead can stay in there as I'm strip planking the hull. So the first one that I'm going to do is station 5. So having my compass set at 3/8 of an inch, I'm going to go on the station line and I'm going to make a small arc. And I'm going to do that several places here on down the length of the station. Well, now that I've got all of those little arc marks in there, what I have here is a piece of 1/4-inch plywood, and I just made a general cut in it so that it was less than the station line here. And what I'm going to do now, since I have this base line set up, or I should say the line for the strongback, and I'm going to make sure that that is nice and square, which it is, and put a couple of screws in here just to hold it so it doesn't shift around on me. Now, what I'm going to do is use some these tongue depressor popsicle sticks that I use. I have bunches of those for mixing epoxy. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these and we're going to line them up so that the arc of that stick meets the apex of the little arc that I put there. And so we'll do this along the entire base, or along the entire station line, like so. So the first one that I'm going to do is up here at the shear. And I took one of the sticks and on my grinder, I cut it off on an angle so that's because I wanted a really sharp point there. Now, if you're using scrap, you could make little arrow pointed pieces, but the important part is that it's not a flat piece, because then when you start to put your batten on there, that could change it. So either rounded ends like this or pointed arrows. So I put a point on this one for the shear here, and I also have one for down here at the keel. So that's the first one I'm going to do, is to line that point up exactly with the shear at that point, and then put a couple of dots of hot glue on there to hold it. And then the next one, actually probably put more arc marks in there than I actually need. Next one goes right there. Okay, so I'm going to continue to do this throughout the whole station mark here. And then I'm going to finish up with one of the sticks that I have angled here for the keel. So I have a nice sharp point there. Okay, now that we've got that all done, we can take our spiled station now and lay it out on our molding stock. So what I've got here is a sheet of 1/2" MDF. I like MDF because it's a very stable material, it's really inexpensive, and you don't have to really worry about material warping or anything like that. So that's what I'm going to use, is MDF. So the first thing I need to do is now, so you can see I drew a center line here, and I established that same way I did when I was doing the station marks on the lofting floor, and that is that I made a couple of arc marks in order to line that up so that I know that's nice and square. So the first thing is to get this center line lined up well, and I'm going to leave myself just a little extra down here. I'm going to put a couple of weights on there so that doesn't shift around. Okay, so that should be nice and stable on there. So now some spring clamps here. I'll start up here by the shear. Put a clamp, and then I'm going to slowly work this around. Make sure that I'm touching all of my little spots there. And now I can take a pencil and mark that off on here. And I know that is the inside of my planking. going to make a mark up here also so I know where the baseline is. And now that I've done that, I can now flip it over for the other side. Line this up on the center line, and I know where my mark is here at the keel. And some weights on here. And now I'm going to do the same thing as I did on this side. So there I have station 5 all marked out. So my next step is I'm going to get my saber saw and cut that out. I have the exhaust port of my shop vac blowing the dust away so I can see the line. Now that I've got the station cut out, I'm going to use my marking gauge here with a pencil on it, and I've got it set around 4 inches. So I'm going to do is go along here and mark out a space in. Doesn't really matter, it's just an amount that I thought was about the right amount. Okay, now I'm going to cut that out, and then we'll have station 5 all complete. All right, now that we've got station 5 done, we'll check it on the lofting floor. So I'll line it up here with the center line and see, yep, came out perfect. A hot air gun loosens the glue so that I'm able to reuse the pattern for the remaining stations. After all the station molds were cut out, I cut some 2x2 lumber for a cross member along the construction line. I marked it with a center line to align the mold on the strongback when attaching it. So now that I've got all of the molds made, what I need to do now is to make a couple of patterns before I can put the lofting floor away. And one of them is the stern post here at the back, and the other one is the stem in the front. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a piece of vellum here, and I'm going to trace that out so that I have that pattern on paper. And ultimately what I'll do is I will then spray mount that pattern onto a piece of poster board. So the first line that I need to get is the keel here. So line up a few weights. Next piece is back here at the transom. And that's a straight line. And this is where the seat is for the back seat. Just need a straight line here. And then here, I've got the mold, the station mold be here, and then the bulkhead be right here. So then I just need a line where that bulkhead meets. And then just a matter of taking my batten here and reproducing that line. Looks pretty good. So there we have a pattern for our stern post. And I'll mark that. Now I'm going to do the very same thing for the stem, and then we can get ready to start working on the strongback. I've got all the station molds all finished now and ready to be installed on the strongback. And I've also have all of my patterns made that I need off of that. I also did make a couple of patterns here for station 6 and 7 that will be that center bulkheads where the center seat will be. So now I can put the lofting floor to the side and get started building a strongback. So I've got the strongback all completed. Now if you want to know more about how a strongback is assembled, you can check out my earlier video here when I built the strongback for the Haven. So it's basically the same construction, and I actually reused the same material. I just had to cut it down a little bit. Now this basic design is a design that I found in Greg Russell's book, and I will link that book in the description below. So after I found the center line, you can see before I assembled it, I actually marked out all of the stations along here, and then I did it also on the other side. So now what I need to do is to start setting the mold stations up according to those station marks. So I'm going to start here with station 5. Now I'm going to use my center line here and line it up with the center line on the strongback. And then for stations that are 4 of the midship, then the mold needs to be on the fore side. And then the opposite is true on the aft side. The mold needs to be on the aft side of the station mark. So I'll line this up with this face, with the station 5 here, get it clamped in place. So that's first mold station set up. So I will continue to do this for the rest of the molds. I've got all of the molds set up. The only thing that is left to do is to brace all of them vertically. Now, I had mentioned about why I had left the stations 6 and 7 out of the mix right now, and let me show you why that is. So if we look here on the half hull model, we can see where stations 6 and 7 are going to be, and this is where the center seat is. So we wanted to have a full bulkhead that goes down here in order to create a flotation chamber, not only here, but aft and forward. So in order to do that, this material for the bulkhead, I wanted to be a finished material. So what I've done is made up some samples here. Now what I've got are 3 different pieces where I have laminated a piece of mahogany. This is some tongue and groove material that came off of the cabin roof of Victoria. So I have laminated on here some cedar in order to strengthen that 1/2-inch material. So the other one is then, I did one where I cut the material down to 1/4 of an inch and then added the cedar to it. And the final one here is where I had still cut it down to 1/4 of an inch and then added 2 layers. So what I've done is I've measured the weight of each one of these. Now each one of these squares is 9 square inches. So what I'll need to do is to calculate the area of all of the bulkheads and then multiply that by those weights. Because the goal here is to build a strong yet light boat for Steve, because obviously he's going to be lifting this boat on and off of Arabella, and of course he wants it to be very strong because could be in some strong seas. So it'll take a little bit of time for me to do those calculations, and then I'm going to construct each one of those bulkheads. Now in addition to those, I'm going to need to also construct the transom and the stem. And that way, once all those things are done, we can get started planking Victoria. Now I want to take an opportunity to thank all of the new patrons since the last video that have been able to take advantage of all of the free tool design plans and also of the half hull model plans. And in addition to that, some exclusive behind the scenes information. If you haven't become a patron yet, I would like to invite you to do so that you too can enjoy some of those benefits. So that's pretty much it for today. As always, thanks for watching, And I'll see you the next time on The Art of Boat Building.